where all the banks understood that there is no free money anymore, and they have to make sure that their money is not going to the hands of terror organizations. They all brought themselves up to the new level of law of scrutiny. There was one bank that refused. One bank from a region that we didn't touch until then. It's one of the biggest banks in the world. It's called the Bank of China. By the way, there is a signing up sheet that is going away through the tables for you to get updates about our work, decisions, and cases. The Bank of China had a bank account for a Hamas activist named Shurafa, who was sitting in Beijing and receiving money from the headquarters of Hamas in Syria, $100,000 each month. Actually did not reach the 100,000. It always stayed in the 99.999, not to be scrutinized by the banking system. Once the money was hitting his account in Beijing, he was pulling the money out and sending it to his brother and father, other Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The counterterrorism division of the Israeli government met with the Treasury of China, met with officials of the Bank of China, and urged them to close down the account. They told them where the money is coming from and what its destination. But the Chinese say that Hamas is not a terror organization in China, and therefore they have no intention to close down the account. So we were asked if we can take the Bank of China to court. And we agreed. We gathered 80 terror victims that were killed or injured by Hamas, by the rocket Qassams attacks going from Gaza into Sderot and other settlements of the Negev. We gathered victims that either killed or got injured in suicide bombings in the bakery in Eilat, in a restaurant in Tel Aviv. We took all the families of the children that were massacred in a Merkaz Arav Yeshiva in Jerusalem by a Hamas gunman. And we took all these victims and filed a case against Bank of China in New York. This lawsuit drove the Chinese crazy. It was right before the Olympic Games. They sent us warning letters telling us to stop talking about the lawsuit. They told us that by talking about the lawsuit, by connecting their name to terror financing, we are destroying their reputation, we are ruining their names. They threatened us with a libel suit against us in China and with a criminal prosecution against us in China. This is why none of us is going to China anymore. Then, when they saw that we keep going, they filed a motion for Rule 11. This is a motion to fine the lawyers for filing such a lawsuit, in their eyes, frivolous lawsuit, because they claim we don't have evidence. And then they filed a motion to dismiss the case. They claim that this such type of a lawsuit that has nothing to do with New York, because after all, the victims are from Israel, the terror attacks happened in Israel, the bank is in China, this lawsuit should be heard in China. And if the court does not agree to move the case to China, at least they should apply the Chinese law, which doesn't recognize Hamas as a terror organization. We fought back, and last year, the court threw out their motion to dismiss, ordered the case to remain in New York, and applied not the Chinese law, not even the American law, but the Israeli law, that sees clear responsibility for a bank which is in charge for third parties' damages. Now we are trying to bring witnesses to testify about the case. You may have heard it on the news. Israel has some regrets about this case because tremendous pressure from China, but we will keep fighting. We will keep going, and we will fight the Bank of China, not only because we have great evidence and we can win the case, but also because our plaintiffs, our clients, the terror victims, did not stop fighting. Leah Boucassis was only 17 years old when she was walking one Shabbat with her brother, 15 years old, going to Bnei Akiva, a youth movement in Sderot, where the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the rockets are shooting from Gaza. In this instance, you have 15 seconds to find a shelter. She was walking down the street. It was a bare street. There was no bus stop. There was no building to hide underneath them. So the only thing that went into her mind is to protect her brother. She fell over her brother. She covered him. The missiles fell right near their heads. Many shrapnels went into their both heads. She fought for 7 days on her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We will not let them kill our children and keep silent. We will fight back. Another sort of cases are cases against state-sponsored terrorism. Every time Hamas or Islamic Jihad carries out attacks in Israel, we can file a lawsuit against Syria and against Iran in the Federal District Court of Washington. Syria defend themselves. Syria hires a lawyer, an ex-Attorney General of the United States named Ramsey Clark. But Syria is not very happy about these cases. We know that because they come and say that they are a sovereign state, and therefore the court cannot put them on trial. The court throws this allegation because the law that we are suing Syria on says that countries that support terrorism are not acting like sovereign states and should not enjoy sovereign immunity. And therefore, we can get judgment against countries like Syria, like Iran. And we did recently. We won a case against Syria for a young boy, 16 years old boy, that went to eat falafel in a restaurant in Tel Aviv, where an Islamic Jihad terrorist came to the restaurant and blew himself up. After 21 days where the kid was going through operations in the hospital, all his system collapsed and he died. We won a judgment for $332 million against Syria. Iran does not even bother to come to court. They don't hire a lawyer. We usually get a judgment against Iran for hundreds of millions of dollars, and then we think how to collect them. So in the beginning, we found bank accounts that belonged to the Iranian government, frozen bank accounts, which had tens of millions of dollars in them. We wanted to collect this judgment, these bank accounts against our judgment, but the State Department opposed us. The State Department wanted to control the money. They wanted to have a say what to do with the money. They somehow predicted that one day they will have a relationship with Iran and they want to use these bank accounts as a chip in negotiation. We hired a lobbyist. We hired a former Undersecretary of State, Stuart Eisenstadt, to help us to pass the law in the Congress. And we passed a law that overcame the objection of the State Department. The law states that the right of the terror victims to collect their judgment against state-sponsored terrorism overrules any other right. And we were able to get money for families that lost their loved one in suicide bombing in Jerusalem. Then we found a house that belonged to the son of the Shah. Years ago, when the son of the Shah wanted to become a pilot, wanted to learn how to fly a plane, his father sent him to Lubbock, Texas, where they have a big Air Force base, and got him a house. After the Islamic Revolution, this house became an Iranian property, was owned by the Iranian government. We learned about the house. We went to the sheriff in Lubbock, Texas, gave him our judgment against Iran, and asked him to force a sale on the house. The sheriff forced a sale on the house, sold it, and gave us $500,000 towards the judgment. When it comes to assets around the world, Iran acts differently. One day we hear that the National Oil Company of Iran has $500 million in a bank account in Rome. We took our American judgments, we domesticated them in Rome. Along with the motion of domestication, we asked the court to put a lien on the money, and the court did. Called the parties to a hearing in front of him. This time, Iran not only sent lawyers to court, they got the Vatican involved, they sent representatives to court, they got the foreign ministry of the Italian government involved, they sent representatives to court, all the banks that had relations with Iran sent lawyers to court, the National Oil Company sent lawyers to court, they were standing there 20 lawyers and screaming at the judge in Italian. They had two arguments. One, you cannot collect a judgment against the Iranian government against the assets of the National Oil Company. They are not the same entities, they don't share the same assets. And their second argument was very original. They said that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. 20 lawyers were standing there, and yet they claimed that the notice they got about the lawsuit wasn't sufficient. We hired an international law expert that testified that in regimes like Iran, there is no difference between the government to the national companies, and you can indeed collect your judgment against the National Oil Company's assets. We also claimed that the service we did to Iran was sufficient, but the court, who wanted to go on the safe side, ordered us to reserve Iran. And in the meantime, he took off the lien. 1 hour after it took off the lien, Iran shifted the money away from Rome to Thailand. We didn't get the money, but we were told by the security services in Israel that as a result of this lawsuit, Iran never went back to put its money in the Italian banks. And we were asked if we can do the same thing in different other countries. We agreed, we went to France, and Iran pulled its money away from the French bank. We went to Germany, Iran pulled its money away from the German banks. This was before the sanctions against Iran, and that it hardened Iran from using the hard currency, from using the euro, from using the dollars. And as we all know, the Palestinian organization in Gaza use only 3 currencies: the shekel, the dollar, and the euro. So by obstructing Iran from using the hard currency, we were obstructing them from funding terrorism.